My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Chelsea Hinman Miller. It's June 11th, 2025. We're at the Nicholson Library at Linfield University in McMinnville. Chelsea, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
First question, let's get started with why wine?
It really is all I've ever known. I was born and raised in the wine business. I was born in '84 and grew up at Hinman Vineyards in the southern Willamette Valley in Eugene. And I honestly can't think of anything else I do. Truly.
Tell me about your kind of first memories of growing up in wine.
It's hard. I kind of like blur the memory versus the photo, you know, when I see, but I grew up at Hinman Vineyards, and my family from Portland would drive down, like for Easter, for example, and we would do our Easter egg hunts in the fermentation rooms, and which would bleed into the tank room, the barrel room, excuse me. And so we would like, I just have these vivid family memories of holidays at the winery. Mm-hmm. I also remember, and my mom kind of is funny, she doesn't, we have like differing stories, but my version of the story is Joe Dobbs was the winemaker at Hinman, at Wines by Joe, at Hinman back in so it must have been late 80s. And during harvest, so we lived next to the winery, and during harvest, he accidentally switched our house water line with the line in at the winery. So I was, I don't know, 8 or 9 in the shower, and that red wine pungent smell, and he had crossed. So like our dishes were being washed with Pinot Noir. I was showering in Pinot Noir. There was Pinot Noir in the toilet. Like it had just completely, and there's a photo of, I think it was like the bottom of the dishwasher, the standing water. And I remember being like, we should send this in, at the time, America's Funniest Home Videos. And this can only happen, like how crazy. So that's like a memory I have, and then just story upon story running across to the fermentation room or the barrel room to be like, tell my dad it's time for dinner, or whatever it was. So it's just always been around me. You know, walking through the vineyard for the bus to pick me up for school. I mean, bizarre stuff. That such this little sliver of the wine community experienced as a child.
So I'm curious about kind of other memories of your upbringing, wine or not related. Tell me about kind of growing up in that era and in that space.
Well, growing up, you know, it was a rural upbringing, right? So there were no we had neighbors, but not really. You know, our driveway was a quarter mile long. So we had big St. Bernards. You know, we were self-sustaining at this winery. My mom was a teacher growing up, and so she was, you know, she had long hours as a teacher driving into town. I don't have a ton of, like, going to Crow Elementary. I don't know how familiar you guys are with, like, outside of Eugene, like, going to Crow Elementary, and I don't have a ton of memories outside of the school bus. Mm-hmm. The school bus being a big drive to get, you know, home.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about your dad and his involvement in wine.
So my dad was one of the pioneers in the wine business. You know, he started in 72 was when he's planted. First vintage, I don't think was until 77, 78. But he was bottling in 72. I don't think bottling well, but he was bottling. My dad's a trip, as I was saying earlier. He's the best. He's so unique, so weird, in a lovable and fun way. And he's a wealth of knowledge. He studied winemaking at the Institute in Germany, in Geisenheim. And I actually last March was able to go with him and see where he studied. And it was just so special. And I think too, as we go through these, I do want to say, like, my mom, she did it too, right? Like on the weekends, yes, she was teaching, but she was doing the tasting room. She was organizing whatever wine shows. You know, Seafood and Wine was a big one back then. Doing the label design. So she was part of that too. But my dad really, I mean, it was his vision, his iconic just branding and personality that really put Hinman Vineyards what it was back then.
So after growing up in that, tell me about kind of as you're approaching ending high school, what you're thinking about doing with your life.
So I went to UC Santa Barbara for a year and ended up coming back for financial reasons, and then started at U of O and started working for King Estate right away, and was doing the Made in Oregon tastings. And then I would do grocery store tastings and whatever it was, whatever they needed, pay this, however old I was, 20-year-old or whatever. And then I graduated from U of O and I worked harvest twice for King Estate. And then came up, and I was working at Turtles, all the things, Beppe and Gianni's, I worked.
The Eugene tour there.
Exactly. And moved up to Portland and with King Estate and just started doing distributor management and getting in on the ground floor of what that looked like to be with sales reps and distributor managers, and sell wine, on the streets, if you will. So that was my start. And I was with King Estate for 7 years.
Tell me about the first harvest there. After growing up in it, what was it like doing a harvest at King Estate?
It was really hard. I'm still friends with some of the other interns that I worked with. I respect the process so much, and it was awesome. Like, I definitely think that my palate. I was in charge of inoculation, so I would go tank to tank and manage the fermentation, and like yeast ads or whatever it would be, and I think that my palate really got to be where it is and developed starting the first harvest. I think when you're tasting wines during fermentation is when you start to tweak a real elevated palate.
So you mentioned going up to Portland after that. Tell me about getting into that side of the business. What were the biggest sort of challenges up front? What did you have to learn?
I was really young, right? So I was 21, 22, and I was able to skip the distributor side and go straight to the supply side, which in the wine business is pretty unheard of. And a lot of that I got was, oh, well, she's, it was a family, like you're a Hinman, you kind of have everything handed to you, which was not. Like, my dad lost the winery in the 90s for various reasons, so we were very financially insecure for most of my adolescence. So things were not handed to me in any capacity. So that was something I fought against or had to kind of overcome. And I always, even to this day, have felt very lucky that I didn't have to work for a distributor, because I have still sitting here zero interest in that. Like, I just don't. The distribution side of the business is really hard. And it's not that I'm adverse to hard work. I just don't have any interest in it. I think it's pretty cutthroat.
So tell me about some of those early tastings. What was it like pouring wine and trying to sell wine at that age?
Well, here's a 20-something, like if trying to sell 40, or even then, it was like probably $35, $40 bottle of wine. And why am I going to buy this from you? But I always, from a young age, was able to talk about wine eloquently. Just being how I grew up, I know how to sell a bottle of wine. So it was fun. It was challenging, but it was great. Like, I think I always knew in the back of my head that I'm never going to do anything else. Why would I,
So how do you sell a bottle of wine?
The story. I think wine, there's so few people that actually know wine, can really taste a nuance in wine. So wine's the power of persuasion, for just the average consumer. There's a lot of consumers out there that want to know and think that they know about wine. So you can paint a picture of what they're tasting or what the aromas are or the experience. I think you sell wine on experience.
So take me through how you mentioned your King Estate for 6 years. Tell me about other roles you had as you stayed at the business.
I went from King Estate to a company called Terlato, based in Illinois. And actually, when I just silenced my watch, the man who hired me there, his name's Arjun Dewan. and we're working together again, which is so full circle. He's a mentor of mine. He hired me and to run their estate portfolio, which I always liken it to like it still is to this day, like the Lamborghinis and Ferraris of the wine world. Gaia and Chapoutier and Champagne Bollinger and Two Hands, like these really, really nice chimney rock wine portfolios, and I was managing 8 states in the Northwest, really not knowing what I was doing. Like I still can't believe that he hired me. And I was with them for 6 years, and Sokol Blosser was in the portfolio at the time, and that was kind of I got to travel the world and see Gaia and you know, work with Gaia and these just iconic wine brands. And it was cutthroat sales. I mean, you didn't hit your number, there were consequences. Like the Trelato family they're wonderful people, but there was no understanding of why it didn't work. It works. Mm-hmm. And I have that mentality now because of them. But boy, was it fun to have like James Bond Bollinger's the Bond champagne, and whatever the Daniel Craig movie was coming out. And so I still, in my cellar downstairs, have these really cool James Bond Bollinger Grandonnay champagne. Like there was some cool stuff that happened during my tenure at Trelato with stuff like that.
That's amazing.
It was so cool.
I'm curious about learning wine on that level, learning that kind of the kind of elite tier of wine. What's different about it? How do you approach it differently?
I think when you know your earlier question of asking me how did I sell like King Estate, when you're selling a $400 bottle of Barolo or Barbaresco, the consumer that you're talking to is not the paint the experience consumer. It's they know the vintage, they know the row, they know maybe Angelo or Gaia themselves, or Michel Chapoutier if you're going that direction. You really need to know about the vintage, about the growing conditions, about the vinification. And it was, I think, from that point on that I really decided you need to know your shit. So it was just, and it was a lot of men. I know I think the key, everyone talks about a female winemaker, a female business owner. When you get into still in this higher tier wine sales, international or domestic, it's a lot of white men. I mean, 98% of the people in the room are white privileged men. And that was who I was doing business with.
So were there specific challenges to that for you?
Yeah, a lot of times doing a wine dinner, for example, I remember at a Seattle club, and where they wouldn't even stop talking as you were presenting the wines. It was like they see through you. It just didn't matter what you were there to educate or share, or the story, or, and I'm not selling that expensive wine anymore, so I don't know. Maybe that's changed. I hope for the women that are out there doing it that it has, but maybe not. I don't know.
How did your palate change when you're selling those kinds of wines?
Oh my God, in the best way possible. Come on. Yeah. I was so hit over the head with Pinot Noir for so long. Even, I was raised in the French, European style where we would have watered down wine. Not a lot, but my parents would let us experience that, or we would taste wine as children. And so I think my palate started to develop then. But there was a good 7 to 8 years where I was just I didn't know anything that was going on in the Oregon wine business. I was so removed. I was kind of burnt out on it a little bit. It felt oversaturated. And so I was really into drinking these European, and even going to big reds. You grew up in the Oregon wine business. I have a Pinot palate, period. And trying to change and really respecting Argentinian Melback or Italian reds or whatever it might have been, the blinders went out.
What did you really start to like or start to appreciate at that time? Were there certain styles you found yourself drawn to?
Bubbles. Bubbles. Bubbles and frankly, a lot of like fun rosé, fun whites. I'm someone who will drink a rosé in December. You know, I don't really think that needs to be a seasonal vibe.
So what happened? What came after Terlato?
After Terlato, I went to Mercer, which I was laid off. So the other thing too within my story is that the alcohol business, there's tons of turnover, to be honest. Like, you know, one company buys another company. Sokol Blosser left Terlato, Bollinger left Terlato. And as a result, you know, Sokol Blosser was 60% of my business in the Northwest. So, and it was like, there's never been any hard feelings when any of this has happened because, you know, you have to have sales to justify the salary, if you will. So I went to Mercer, and they're the largest land owner one of them in Horsehaven Hills. And that was really, well, Mercer and the Mercer family, they're wonderful. They don't just do wine, they do a lot of things. But I hadn't sold Washington wine before too, so that was a learning opportunity too. And I'd had my son when I went to Mercer, so I think they ended up taking on a national sales team. And so as the dissolvement of that relationship, I was really okay with it to just be with my son for a little while.
What were your impressions of sort of the Horsehaven Hills and the Washington wine at that point?
I felt like it was a really, and this is just my experience, so this is just blanket. It was hard. It was a hard sell. It was a hard sell with my experience to go more on the national basis. It's not a region that's as recognized, in my opinion, as like an Oregon Pinot Noir. I don't know why that is. Even like I most recently was working with a Walla Walla brand, and even then, Oregon Pinot Noir is has this thing, cachet.
So after having your son, and what prompted you to decide to get back into wine at that point?
Well, it was after Lincoln was born. It was financially driven, and I started working with a company called Garachi, which was formerly TGIC. So I had come full circle and started selling these Argentinian wines, which is like, talk about I was with Terlato, these Lamborghini and Ferraris. I came down to, selling in 6 or 7 containers at a time of Argentinian mailback at like $4 a bottle. It was such this like interesting change, but there was like that rush of selling that, these big transactions that were fun to follow and seeing it in the retail space. And that's where I really, and even with Tior, my brand, and then my family's private label brand, I'm very focused on retail. I'm sure you've had other people come in and say brands are made on premise. I don't believe that anymore after COVID. I just don't think that's a thing anymore, in my experience. But I learned how to navigate the retail relationship at TGIC Garachi, and made the buyer contacts and understand the pitch. And I found success as a result from focusing retail.
You mentioned Tior. What point does that come into the story?
So Tior, I was with the Walla Walla company and the Walla Walla brand, and I was pregnant again. We'd had struggled very much with infertility and didn't think we were going to be able to get pregnant with the second. And so I found out the week before I was leaving to go to Pro Wine with my dad. And doing the math, I'm like, I would have maternity leave, come back, and I would be doing the same circuit of Germany for 10 days, Canada, Florida, New York. And to give honor to that job and to do it well and be there in those markets, it didn't work in my gut with having a new baby. So I was lying in an ultrasound, and my husband was at this one with me, and I was like, Greg, I feel like it's time. He's like, okay. So, and I always knew as a little girl or not a little girl, but like I knew Tior was gonna be what I was gonna do. So scrambled, got with my graphic designer. I, sent her the label from the 70s because Tior became, in the late 70s, early 80s, became the largest wine brand in Oregon. And it grew to like 30,000 cases, which back then is, even today, 30,000 cases is a large wine brand. It's incredible what it was, just so cool. And I feel like had I not come and just like revived it, no one would ever talk about it. Like it was the biggest winery. Hinman Vineyards was the largest winery in Oregon at the time, and this was the largest wine brand. And it was a Pinot Gris. I think it was just a red, and then it was a blush, which was rosé, which was really white zin because it was the 80s, and that's not, we didn't. And I'll try to find, I'll send you some photos of the old, and they were magnums with no vintage. So but it worked then, And so I just knew that it was time to revive. And, we bottled just about 200 cases in November. It was a terrible time to be doing all this. Sets were already done for the holidays. So my husband was on paternity with the new baby, and we sold it to family and friends in some restaurants in Portland and just hustled. And I bottled 1,500 cases of my 23 vintage, and am bottling next week my Pinot Gris. I've got distribution in 9 states, and Safeway and Albertsons is bringing it in the fall. I've got it in New Seasons. Soho House is pouring it by the glass. It's just, there's this traction. It's hard, let me tell you. But I just feel that it's gonna be something. And I feel that that's what my kids are gonna do. I feel strongly, I just have this backbone that my babies are gonna take this brand and keep building it.
That's really cool. I like
Super
that.
cool. It's super cool.
So tell me about the initial run of Tior. What were the years that it was a kind of under the Hinman label?
So first vintage, I think, was 79. That's actually a really good, I don't know what the last vintage when Tior became Hinman, and that's actually, such a great question, and I should know that, and I'll ask my dad. Sometimes my dad's memory is a little about, but I think Tior blended into Hinman, right? And Hinman Vineyards, you can still find on stores at Weimar. I think they've kind of bastardized it now. It's their bottom tier wines, but it's still out there. So yeah, it was those 3 SKUs, like I said, and my guess, we were bought out of Hinman in 93. So I can't imagine that if it's not broke, don't fix it. I'm sure that they had the label through then, but I can confirm.
And so when you were kind of bringing it back, what was important to you? What was important to you about, what did you want to showcase? What did you want to make sure that was part of the new Tior?
Well, the deer on the label, so my label, while I love it, is not necessarily what I would have done. But I wanted to have a deer. So Tior means deer in High German, which is the old dialect where my dad studied winemaking. So it was important for me to have the deer on the front. Not as much with the Pinot Gris, but I wanted it to feel feminine. I'm really leaning into being female-owned, being a young entrepreneur. I'm 40. The story of starting this when I was pregnant is crazy. And I didn't know that it was important to talk about the legacy that I am. I've always known my dad it's just so special, and being one of the first guys doing it, especially in the southern Willamette Valley. But that catches. People seem to care that, Doyle Hinman's daughter is continuing her own version of what he built. And it wasn't until I was doing an interview for a magazine in Illinois that I got that, where she really honed in on that with me. And I was like, oh, there's the legs, right? That's what I need to grip. I was too close to it. So it's been cool. I feel I'm very I'm very quiet. I get really uncomfortable talking about it. I get really like being braggadocious about this cool history that I have, and I'm starting to get better at it. But it's like a hard thing to be like, hey, look at me. It's hard.
Tell me about the wines themselves that you're producing.
Yeah, thank you. So the 23 Pinot Noir is predominantly Colleen Clemens fruit. It's about 65%. I wish it could be 100%. I just couldn't afford it. So then a blend with a winery that we have a great relationship with down in the southern Willamette. Everything's bottled and produced at Eugene Wine Cellars in Eugene. And then I'm bottling just a couple hundred cases of Pinot Gris. I need a cash influx as a new business. And then from Sweet Cheeks Winery is where I'm buying. It's so good. When he sent me the sample, I couldn't believe it. So I pulled the trigger on that. And I don't know what else. Rosé scares me. You know, like I love drinking rosé, but no one likes drinking old rosé. I don't, at least. So I don't know where to go. I don't know what I'm going to do next. I think a Chardonnay would be fun. Do I do some single vineyard Pinots? But then the really high end, I think the Oregon wine business is so saturated. It's so saturated that I really, the most I'd ever want to do would be 4 or 5 SKUs. And I'm going so hard and focusing so strongly in retail. Not just in our state, but West Coast and in Ohio or Kentucky, or who are those opinion leaders at the retail level that are going to approve the wine, that are going to start talking about it. And that's where I think my brand will grow.
You mentioned earlier that that's kind of a unique approach, or at least a lesser approach than focusing on DTC. So tell me about the retail focus. How do you approach? How do you find who you're looking for? How do you sell your wine? I
mean, pick and shovel and like guerrilla marketing. I feel like it's a lot of online stalking, like LinkedIn and social, and the amount. I don't know where I heard it. I think it was on some podcast that you have to reach out in sales. It's 6 times before you'll get an answer, and I'm finding it more to be like 11 times, but I think that I do have that hustle of like, a no's an answer, and I'm okay with the no. I'm not okay with like the unknown. Just respond, drives me nuts. But I've used all of these relationships that I've had from all these other suppliers to just start telling my story and sharing. And like, I have to be really honest, AI has been super helpful with like, hey, give me a list of wine shops in Santa Barbara County who have wine clubs. Give me, a list in LA of the top gourmet grocery stores that have multiple, like multi-unit brands. Stuff like that has been super helpful. My efficiencies have gone up exponentially, which has been really fascinating. Also, and I haven't talked about this at all outside of Tior, but DW Hinman, so my family is still, my mom, dad, and myself are still in the wine business heavily. We do private labels. And my job with DW Hinman is finding those relationships. So currently, like Trader Joe's, for example, the Pinot Gris at Trader Joe's right now, under the Trader Joe's label, is we produce that for them. And that's been a relationship I found. We're sending samples tomorrow to Bevmo and GoPuff. So that's a space that is we've found success in also. I don't know if you shop at TJ's, but that Pinot Gris is stellar, and it's $9.99. It's a really, really nice bottle of wine, like for real.
So for those who aren't familiar, tell me a little bit how the private label relationship works.
Yeah, so again, that was me cold calling Trader Joe's and getting a yes. Sending like just over and over. We'll send them samples for approval. On the DW Hinman, I think other private label companies will do the artwork and design. We have no business in getting involved in, you want this yellow or that gold, or it's your thing. And we package the goods for the customer. And from the second we ship down to a consolidated warehouse down in American Canyon, it's Safeway's or Trader Joe's ownership. And then they spawn off to their locations from there. We went back and forth. And a lot of times I feel like the private label brands don't get a lot of respect, and it's good juice. It's really good juice. Like Sam's Club, we've gone back and forth with Sam's Club. We haven't had anything land there yet, but super, like Kirkland, great product. Great. Willamette Valley Vineyards does Kirkland's, and it's great juice. It's a really safe and lucrative part of the industry because you don't, like I'm sitting on my Tior inventory. The inventory management's it's not our problem. So it's a really safe space to be in the wine business, which is so kind of volatile at the moment,
Tell me about pouring Tior wine, having this legacy, and bringing these wines out and pouring them for retail customers or for shops. Tell me about what that feels like for you and how the responses have gone so far.
I haven't had a no. When I've poured that wine and told this story, I haven't had a no. Because it's just such a gripping story. Like, I don't know how else to say it. There's not anyone else in this business that can walk in and say what I can say. It's just so cool. I'm doing my first, I have distribution in Ohio. I'm doing my first market visit. I don't know how much you guys know about that side, where I'm going in and, working the market and doing wine dinners and doing the whole thing. And so I'm doing that in September, and that'll be my first, launch into something that's not in Oregon.
So I'm curious, we'll kind of broach it this way. Tell me about selling wine now versus selling wine, say, 10 years ago. How has the process changed?
That's a good question. I used to rely so heavily on my distributor and my sales reps and district managers or whomever in the distributor tier. They're my mode of delivery now. I don't see the point. And so I'll take Tior out of it because I don't really have a big distributor. I'm with Great Becks on the West Coast, but I'm just using them as my delivery mechanism, and I'm doing the sales. But even then, when I turn over my distribution to them, I know that they're going to have an oversaturated book and be one of many. It could be a new sales rep that doesn't even know how to say Tior. Who knows what their background is. And I'm not paying them per case or on an incentive basis, so they don't want to sell Tior. I know I'm going to be doing most of that for them. And back in the old days, the golden age, especially back at Trelato, those sales reps, they hustled for you. They wanted to sell your brand, and it's just changed.
So as you look ahead for Tior, what have you not done with it yet that you want to do? What do you kind of hope it becomes?
So much. I hope it becomes a household name. That doesn't mean I'm out there to grow 20, 30, 40, 50,000 cases. It really makes sense at 10. I'd like to have 2 or 3 employees that I pay really well and elevate them, and they learn the business and they go off to do whatever they want to do. I want to be a really respected part of the industry. And it's my own money. This is all grassroots that I'm building this. This is, my blood, sweat, and tears that I will be as this grows. I'd like to have a strong wine club. That's an area of the business I don't really understand. I've never managed one before, trying to figure out how to do that. But I'd like Tior to be 10,000 cases. That's my goal. I don't know why that's my number, but that's my number. And I'd like it to continue its retail, to be authorized. I'm 11 months into this or 12 months into this, and to be authorized at Safeway is a big effing deal. Cluster 1 Safeway, it's a huge deal. There are brands that I'm sure you've talked to that still haven't had success in Safeway. So there's these little wins that I know I'm getting that I'm trying to celebrate, even though it feels like it's still only 6 bottles in each Safeway, but it's the placement that matters.
What is the secret to that? How did you get to Safeway so quickly?
Again, it's I just think I know how to speak retail. I get retail. I know what they're looking for. I know how to position myself with a point of difference. And as silly as it sounds, they seem to really like my label design. And a lot of people buy when you're looking at the set. It's like going to a bookstore. They buy on the cover. And when I was designing the label, I knew I wanted it to have a femininity, be female driven, and it is. It's teal. It's like it stands out on a shelf, and buyers know that. They know that like they're sick of the cream and the burgundy, and if you have money, gold flecking or flakes or whatever. Like that's what the Pinot Noir business is right now. It's so boring. Like the set, it's a lot of neutral.
So you've mentioned saturation a few times. So tell me about the Oregon wine market right now.
I think the Oregon wine market is hard. I never set out to sell wine in Oregon. And my husband, like, I would say this and he would think I was nuts. Like, why would I go, this wine buyer is gonna taste 30 Pinot Noirs today. Like, I don't care. Like, to be another SKU on his shelf, that's just not of interest to me. I wanna sell in California, where just this many people are going, and then Ohio, where even smaller amount of people are going. That's always been my goal. The other thing that whether it's social network or just my husband and I's network, we've really pushed on our friends and family and who do they know, and who do they know, and then who do they know. So we've been able to do this like very cool grassroots thing and get, frankly, a shit ton of wine out to friends and family who are giving it to other people and have this like quiet nudge thing happening. That's like a very non-answer to the Oregon wine market outside of, I don't know, but I don't want to know. I want to know how it is to sell wine in California, because I can do that. I'm set up to do that, and a lot of other businesses aren't. At least that are my size. You know, the Sokals are, the Stoller, they're doing it and they're doing it well. But you're not finding a female-owned, small, artisanal Oregon brand down in LA. It's hard.
So with the kind of the moment we're in right now, politically, economically, what are the biggest challenges for selling wine right now, and what is the kind of short-term future look like?
I don't know what the challenges are yet, because I haven't felt them yet. I've felt them more on the private label side. So when like the amount of bulk that's on the market to sell to private label potential customers, the price is just getting lower and lower and lower because there's so much and they're getting so many offers. I don't know if you saw the news, the grocery outlet has that wine, that Pinot Noir, that's I think $4, that Oregon Pinot. It actually made
the second cheapest wine?
Yeah. That's really sad. So, and he's a lovely man, the buyer at grocery outlet. He's super responsive and kind, but that's just, it's a sad thing for the state of the business. I think that the amount of wine that it will be available, I don't think yet. I think it's gonna come like end of summer is when we're gonna start to feel this like really big balloon getting really, really big. And then how retail buyers are gonna buy for the holidays, it's just, I don't know how it's gonna impact yet. Pricing will be my big thing. But like Canada, that's so sad. You know, I have a great broker in Canada. I think I would have gotten a hit in Canada this year, but that's a solid, it's a stop now. And it's sad because they're nice people. And I think Oregon sells like 350,000 cases a year to Canada, maybe more.
So tell me about the way you've seen the Oregon wine industry grow. Obviously, you've known about it. You know it from a pretty young age. What is different about it now, and what does the sort of the future for Oregon wine look like?
I feel like there's a lot of. I feel like it feels like sometimes that everyone's doing it. I don't know. I think it. I just was talking to Greg on the way down, because he had a friend of his call him who's also in the business. And in my head, I'm thinking, but like you know, you're a lawyer and there's that like sex appeal to get into the wine industry. And I think in my opinion, I'm seeing a lot of that, you know, a lot of money because they want to pad their cellars or say they own a winery. And I think with what's going to happen with the influx of wine available based on tariffs, based on what's happening, consumers are naturally going to look for a lower price point because there's so much available. So those really high-end $60 Pinot Noirs, like that's a hard playground to be playing in right now, in my opinion. And that's not to say that they're not great to drink. And the future of the business, shit, I don't know. I don't know until we get to the next administration. Like, honestly, I don't think we're going to, I think things will get corrected, I would think, pretty quickly in 3 years or whatever. But I hope. I don't know what's going to happen. I do think that the Oregon sets, like Rayleigh's, for example, is a chain in Northern California. They're expanding their Oregon set. Bevmo, like the response from Total Wine about taking on Tior or private label is that they're over-skewed in Oregon Pinot Noir. They're not looking to expand their set. So that means it's one of the biggest sets in Total Wine, the Total Wine footprint, which is the second largest spirits cellar in the United States behind Costco. And his response wasn't even bad. Not like we're over-skewed to the point where we're never gonna do it, but we're really happy things are humming in our Oregon set and we don't need more. And that's an okay response, but like for that to be from the second largest, I was fascinated by that response, that we're on the map. Washington's not, like he's not saying anything about Washington. It's really inspiring.
Future for yourself, we talked about the kind of the way where you want Tior to go. Anything else on your horizon, personally or professionally, that you're excited about or looking forward to?
My focus with a little girl, a baby, and my husband's an identical twin, and his brother and they were over, and his kids were over for dinner, and we have this little like question game that we play with the kids. And I can't remember the exact verbiage, but it was, what do you want to do as you're older? But it wasn't as boring as that. But my son, who is very into soccer, of course, said he wants to be an MLS player. And then after that, he wants to grow and run Tior. That's this 8-year-old little boy saying that to me. And I was like, I know whatever I'm doing and wherever this is going, that's because he gets that, like I'm doing something right. And that was like a very big aha moment for me of he's absorbing this hustle that I have. And just to instill that, like that's what I want to keep doing. And that's where I see myself going, is having him still be into that in 5 years, 6 years, when he's a jerk high schooler,
Maybe he'll be one of those rare, very nice high schoolers. You never.
He might be. He's a sweet little boy. So I hope so. And I'd like to see 4 to 6 SKUs from Tior. And my husband always jokes, and why my dad's still around, that it would be great to own a winery, like what to lose all of our money. But to have a facility would be great. I don't know if that ever will happen. It's never been like a true, I think my dad would like to see that happen. And I know that my parents, I just know how cool they think this is, that Tior's back, and that they can go to Market of Choice, by Sheldon, and go buy Tior is cool for them.
That's so cool.
It's so cool, so cool.
All the questions that I have for you, anything I didn't ask that I should have, anything we didn't cover that you'd like to cover?
I don't think so. I think it's fun to talk about all of it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Of course. Really, so lovely.
Thanks for sharing, and thanks for making me think about interviewing your dad, because that was a ton of fun. So thank you so much, taking the time, sharing your story.
Thank you.
Go ahead and let you off the hook.
Cool.